The horror of Unit 731, the scariest experiment ever conducted on humans. Welcome to What If. What if I told you there was a place where the worst nightmares of humanity became a reality? A place where men, women, and even children were turned into nothing more than disposable test subjects for gruesome experiments? This is not a horror movie. This is history, and its name was Unit 731. During the 1930s, as Japan expanded its empire across Asia, a secret and horrifying project was unfolding in Harbin, China. It was led by the Imperial Japanese Army under the control of Shiro Ishii, a scientist with a terrifying obsession to master biological warfare at any cost. Ishii convinced Japan's military leaders that disease could be more powerful than any bomb. With their full support, he was given an entire facility, unlimited resources, and complete immunity from any moral or ethical restraints. The prisoners inside Unit 731 weren't seen as humans. They were called Marut, a Japanese word meaning logs. This wasn't just cruel terminology. It was a deliberate effort to strip them of their identity. These victims were Chinese civilians, prisoners of war, and even Koreans and Russians. To the doctors of Unit 731, they were nothing more than disposable experiments. What happened inside Unit 731 is beyond human comprehension. Let's take a closer look at the unimaginable cruelty that took place behind those walls. Vivisection without anesthesia. Prisoners were taken into cold, sterile operating rooms. The doctors did not use anesthesia. Instead, they sliced open living people while they were fully conscious. They would remove a person's stomach and attach their intestines directly to their esophagus just to observe how long they could survive. Others had their limbs amputated and reattached to the opposite side of their bodies. If a prisoner screamed too much, their vocal cords were simply cut out, so they could continue suffering in silence. Frostbite tests. The prisoners were forced to stand in the brutal winter cold, their bare arms exposed to the freezing air. They were doused with water repeatedly until their skin and muscles froze solid. To test the damage, doctors would smash their frozen arms with sticks or hammers. If the flesh shattered like glass, the experiment was considered successful. Plague and germ warfare. Thousands of people were deliberately infected with diseases like bubonic plague, cholera, and anthrax. Some were injected directly with viruses, their symptoms monitored as their bodies rotted from the inside. Others were locked in airtight chambers, where poisonous gas was released, suffocating them slowly while researchers recorded the results. Weapon testing on live humans. The Japanese military wanted to test new weapons, and Unit 731 provided them with the perfect opportunity. Victims were tied to wooden stakes in open fields. Explosives were detonated near them to analyze how shrapnel tore through the human body. Flamethrowers were used to burn prisoners alive. Some were injected with horse blood or even seawater to see if they could survive without proper transfusions. Forced pregnancy and sexual assault experiments. Female prisoners were forcibly impregnated so researchers could study how diseases affected unborn children. In some cases, doctors performed C-sections without anesthesia, removing the fetus while the mother was still alive. Others were subjected to brutal sexual violence as researchers tried to study the transmission of syphilis and other STDs. For years, the atrocities of Unit 731 remained one of history's darkest secrets. Japan did everything in its power to erase the evidence. When World War II was coming to an end in 1945, and the Soviet army was closing in, Shiro Ishii ordered the entire facility to be destroyed. Records were burned. Thousands of prisoners were executed to silence the truth. But perhaps the most horrifying part of this story is what happened next. You might expect that the scientists of Unit 731 were punished for their crimes. But that's not what happened. Shiro Ishii and his men were never held accountable. Instead, they made a deal with the United States government. In exchange for their research on biological warfare, they were granted full immunity. Instead of facing trial, Ishii and many of his scientists lived out their lives freely. Some even found new jobs working for American and Japanese research institutions. The victims of Unit 731 were erased from history, and their suffering was ignored for decades. It wasn't until years later that survivors and witnesses spoke out, revealing the full extent of Japan's war crimes. But by then, it was too late. Unit 731 is a chilling reminder of what happens when science is twisted into a weapon of pure evil. These weren't just experiments. These were acts of absolute cruelty. And even today, the full truth is still not widely known. So ask yourself this: if governments were willing to cover up something this horrific, what else have they hidden from us?